I wanted to start by thanking Steve Lee for his interest in my prisoner of war experience, because it got me started on something that I've wanted to do for a long time, that is, tell the story. To orient you, our assigned area was about 30 miles from Strasbourg. I will be talking later about a train ride that started in Stuttgart and ended about 250 miles north at Stalag 11B. At the time, it was the Germans' last-ditch effort to recapture parts of France and Belgium. They attacked Bastogne, and the infamous Battle of the Bulge started it. At the same time, they wanted to get back their trophy, the city of Strasbourg. They established a beachhead over the Rhine River above Strasbourg. This beachhead was 7 miles long, 3 miles wide, and as I recently found out, it was composed of the German 519th Corps, the 34th Panzer Corps, 21st Panzer, the 25th Panzer Grenades, the 10th SS Panzer, the 7th Parachute, 384th Assault Gun, and the 667th Assault Gun. In our briefing for the attack, we were told we'd be up against about 500 disorganized troops. Unknown to us, other parts of our division were fighting this beachhead for some time and getting clobbered. It was our turn to attack and clear them out. The German troops were about 60,000 strong. It was decided that a pre-dawn surprise attack was the answer. So on January 16, 1945, at 3 a.m., we attacked. It was a foggy morning and visibility was nil. The temperature was near zero. There was about 4 inches of snow on the ground. Our anxiety for this attack was terrifying. To get out of going into battle, the sergeant shot himself in the foot. Several others called in sick and didn't make it. The fear of what was ahead that day was in all of us. You wondered why you should go. You knew you had a duty to obey your commanders, to your fellow soldiers, and to your country, and you didn't want to be a coward or a deserter. It was considered the proper thing to do. The area was flat and muddy, so we couldn't rely on tank support, except on paved roads. And on a paved road, the tank was a sitting duck. This map was a drawing of how the operation was supposed to go and where we were supposed to attack. If you haven't gone on a cross-country walk in the dark, believe me, it's impossible to find a point. So we walked towards the enemy, and about 6 a.m. we captured a German outpost. And since we were lost, asked him where his troops were. He was as scared as we were. We turned the column in the direction indicated by the outpost. In 5 minutes, we were in a position exactly where the Germans wanted us, right in their machine gun crossfire. Why we believed the outpost, who knows? We hit the snow-covered ground, listening to bullets flying all around, hearing the loud cries of our men getting hit, moans of the dying, bullets flying all over. There was no place to go. We were in an area flat as a pool table. We were sitting ducks, just praying we weren't the next to get hit. You were so scared that you didn't even think about the cold and the snow. Your adrenaline was really working. It was finally dawn about 7:30 a.m., and you could see things. We lost 100 young men in 10 minutes. Nothing but dead, or non-moving, as later discovered, comrades on all sides of us. As dawn came, the Germans stopped firing their machine guns and sniped at anything that moved. About 9 a.m., I moved my head to get a better view, and I got a bullet that creased my back. If the bullet was 1 inch lower, I wouldn't be alive. My first reaction, after I knew I wasn't going to die was that of joy. I was thinking, now I will go back to a nice clean hospital for a while and get out of this hell. After moving and getting hit, I decided to lay still because I was no good to anybody dead. Not very heroic, but very logical. I was able to look back as our loudmouth, brave sergeant lost his nerve and senses and stood up and ran to the rear. He was hit in the mouth as he ran. He was awarded the Silver Star for bravery. We laid on the ground for about 8 hours. Why we didn't freeze to death, I don't know. Finally, the Germans came out to loot the dead bodies of their shoes. As my buddy Charlie Fitz said, I had on a pair of new snowpacks. A German wanted them. And when he turned me over to take them off, he saw that I wasn't dead. It scared him, and he pulled his pistol. I'll never know why he didn't shoot. He told me to rouse and saw that I couldn't move very well, and he helped me up. My feet and legs were frostbitten because I had beaten my clothes at least 3 times during the day. My feet were also frostbitten and sore for about the next 5 years. To my right, I saw a white flag being raised and heard the crowds call, "Rouse." I got up as best I could and became a prisoner of war. My pal Tom Woods was about 10 yards in front of me, and he had been hit in the leg. In front of him, another 10 yards, was our friend Albert Burnins, who was dead. I had seen dead cows bloat before, but never humans. Al had bloated. After I was home, his mother called me to find out what happened to her son. I didn't want to tell her the truth, and the lies just didn't come out very well. Let me read some excerpts from her letter. Her questions was, did you see him when he was shot? Did he suffer? Where was he hit? Please tell me all. Because we followed the German outpost directions, we had to turn the column, and we bunched up and were killed in bunches. The concentration of dead comrades was cause for the FBI in later years to come to my home to investigate if an atrocity was committed. We were walked through the Steinwald forest, which was our objective. My thoughts were, we were so close to our objective that if we would have moved quickly and not listened to the outpost, we would have been behind the machine gun placements before they knew what hit them. And a lot of my friends' lives would have been saved. One of their machine gun placements was a huge room with huge logs for a roof. They were as snug as a rug in there. The hole was so big that I could never see an American soldier hand digging such a room as they had. I helped Tom Wood walk to the pillbox on the other side of the woods. There I bandaged Tom's wound, and he bandaged mine, using our bandages from a kit we carried. The ever-gnawing thought of when are they going to kill us was with us from that day on. This thought was tempered by stories of our killing German prisoners and Germans killing our prisoners. I guess using today's terminology, we were stressed out. You often wonder why the great majority of us didn't have breakdowns, battle fatigue, and become horrible people the rest of our lives. For those who know me, I have no sympathy for those that tell me they are stressed out over relatively insignificant matters. While standing around the German pillbox about 1 p.m., the fog lifted and our air support arrived to strafe us. We were out in the open, no place to go. This was the start of a long series of attacks by our own Air Force. A German lightweight tank was hit about 100 yards away from the pillbox from a shot out of the blue. 2 Germans came out of the top on fire and were brought to the pillbox. The others couldn't get out and burned to death. Being scared to death, we didn't dare jump around and cheer like we wanted to. About 4 p.m. we were walked to the Rhine River near Gamschein and assembled around the barn. The guards made it very clear that if anybody decided to leave, the remainder would be shot. Several of our wounded died at this barn. At midnight, we crossed the Rhine into Germany on a barge that wasn't power-driven but worked by pulling ropes. We walked about 7 miles to a town called Moos. Here we were interrogated, and per our training, I kept answering the questions with only name, rank, and serial number. He finally said, "Hoeweler," which is the German pronunciation for Hoeweler. "Why are you fighting your ancestors?" I wanted to answer but was too scared. I wanted to say because I didn't want my ancestors to succeed in their horrible mission. They would shoot a gun off out back of the schoolhouse every once in a while to make sure we kept being scared. He then told me what date we left Texas, New York, England, what division we were in, etc., etc. He knew so much, I didn't know what else he hoped to obtain. I never determined if the guys ahead of me had talked or that their intelligence was that good. Well, we got out of interrogation without being killed. We were then marched through the Black Forest to Ludwigsburg, about 70 miles away. We walked about 30 miles a day and stayed in what looked like forest ranger stations along the way. The walk through the beautiful mountains renewed my energy because it was a break between battle and what was ahead of us. This was the beginning of being hungry. From here on, until released, we went from U.S. Army rations to nothing at all very quickly. From here on, our daily diet was a slice of bread, which looked and tasted like sawdust, and a bowl of soup, which was basically hot water. We were always hungry. We always dreamed of food, especially desserts and candy. This may be why I eat so much candy and sweets today. We were cold from here on, never in a heated area. It was winter in Germany, which is always cold and without heat. From here on, we would have body lice and no DDT to get rid of the lice. They were on your body, in your hair, moving around, always itching night and day. I had peed in my pants several times because of the cold, sulfamilamide pills, and fright. I had the same filthy clothes on from January 16th until April 14th. My clothes were never washed, and I stank for 4 months. We arrived at Stalag 5B, a German cavalry camp in Ludwigsburg. We were back in more rigid guarded quarters under more military conditions than on the walk. We were not prepared for what would happen next. We were locked in a boxcar and taken to Stalag 11B in Fallingbostel, about 200 miles away. Here we had a new fright, locked in a boxcar and our own Air Force strafing us while we were standing still in the railroad station. Our guards had run away, but we sat, locked in the boxcar. The boxcar was filled with comrades, so cold we had to huddle together to get any warmth. We had no food or water for these 4 days. Naturally, there were no toilet facilities, just a honey bucket for the 40 of us for 4 days, and of course no toilet paper either. We all had one thought: when were we getting out of this mess. Not knowing where we were going or how long it would take, the trip felt like it took 2 years. We finally came to the end of our torturous journey, Stalag 11B, which was a POW camp with 26,000 prisoners, some Russian, British, Italian, Poles, etc. It was an overcrowded place with 2 high bunk beds, full of lice. The barracks were sort of like Hogan's Heroes. We were finally beginning to believe the guards weren't going to kill us because we were Americans. They had this fear of us, a feeling of our greatness as a country. I saw no atrocity against Americans unless you call no food, no heat, no shelter an atrocity. As far as we Americans were concerned, they had lived up to the Geneva Convention. The Russian prisoners had civilian women with them in this particular prison camp. They appeared to have traveled with the Army. Instead of a rifle squad, they had a sex relief squad with them. I was curious as to why the Germans permitted it and what would happen if one of them got pregnant. After about a week in this camp, they asked for work volunteers. A group from our company volunteered: Woods, Fitz, O'Brien, Rice, Scott, and Rich. I always felt it was better to be in a small group rather than a 26,000 person prison, so I volunteered also. We were shipped to Misburg, a suburb of Hanover, for a work detail in a gasoline refractory plant. Our work in the plant was international in scope. The U.S. job was to take the mortar off the bricks that had been knocked down from around the gas tanks by the last bombing. Since cement was scarce, it was mostly scraping sand from bricks. In order not to help the German effort too much, we didn't get much done in our 8-hour day, just enough not to get shot. The British, who were captured at Dunkirk 5 years earlier, were basically on special assignments of maintenance and repairs. It was always very funny to see them stop for tea in the morning and afternoon. To the dismay of their guards, there weren't many things to laugh about. This was one of them. My memory has failed me as to which nationality did what job, but I guess that isn't too earth-shattering. We had Italians, Poles, and French working together. One would wheel the bricks to us, one would wheel them away, and the other would relay the bricks around the gasoline tanks. They kept us separated from the British and other nationalities to keep information at a minimum. The Italians, Poles, and French got to read newspapers, but none of us knew enough of these languages to find out much. One day it took us about 2 hours to find out that Frankfurt was surrounded. If you have had experience in trying to talk or communicate with someone that doesn't speak your language and you don't speak theirs, it can be very, very frustrating, almost like talking to a brick wall. We were allowed to fill out a Red Cross notification that we were all right, but for some reason my family didn't receive mine until I got home. My mother, who weighed 120 pounds when I left for the war, went down to 80 pounds because she was so worried about her son missing in action, and she presumed dead. We were housed in a school gymnasium, which was a better place than in Stalag 11B. Not as many holes to leave cold air in. The only thing I saw that was an atrocity was the killing of a political prisoner. We were walking back to our gymnasium one day and passed some political prisoners. As we passed, the prisoner bent over to pick up a cat that had been run over by a truck. The cat was as flat as a pancake, and he picked it up, presumably to eat it. He was shot for his attempt. It's hard to imagine how blasé and non-emotional you can get when you see something so atrocious and you still don't react. Looking back was almost like walking and living in a trance, like a zombie. You were so fearful for your life, not in a position to object, because your main concern was to stay alive. We each had one thin U.S. Army blanket and one overcoat to protect us from the cold. So it was necessary to sleep with overcoat and shoes on, and if you slept two in a bed, we had two blankets and the body warmth of two people. So my bed partner was Tom Woods of Philadelphia. We helped each other survive. I spent a lot of time praying for the end of this misery. I read the Bible we were given from cover to cover. At that time of life, when you question the existence of God and Jesus Christ, it was good relief to the soul to be able to pray. It was the only place to try to get help. The Bible also became my diary of dates of happenings. It also became a record of all the wild talk about food. One such example is a loaf of bread sliced lengthwise, one layer of chopped beef or ham, one layer of celery, eggs, pepper, one layer of sliced dill pickles covered with cream cheese, chill in an ice box and serve. French sweet potatoes, pulled taffy, divinity, strawberry pie, devil dogs, which was a layer of marshmallow between two chocolate layers. When you're hungry, you think of nothing but something to eat. It was number one priority. We had two different groups among us in Hanover, one that smoked and those that didn't. Those that smoked were so hooked on cigarettes in the same manner as drugs that they needed smoke so badly they traded their food, what little we got, for smokes. Many people say you can't lose weight because of metabolism, etc. Not so. All of those who were in our camp and on our ration of food lost weight. I was about 180 pounds in England, in good shape, no fat. I lost 30 pounds in 3 months. I didn't smoke and got more to eat by trading my share of Red Cross smokes for food, and I lost 30 pounds. Those who smoked and traded food for smokes lost somewhere between 50 to 60 pounds in the 3 months. So if you can't lose weight, use the Army prisoner of war diet, guaranteed to work. We used to ride the streetcar from the gymnasium to our workstation. About the end of March, the bombing stopped the streetcars, and we had to walk to work. One morning, a grandmother about 70 years old with a babushka was standing in the street sobbing. Her home was destroyed by our bombers during the night. She was so outraged that she went after our guards to get their rifles and shoot us. I still felt for this grandmother, who could have been my grandmother, but I could only think, your Hitler and gang brought all this misery on me and now on you. If you have ever visited Monkey's Island at your zoo, you've seen monkeys sitting around in the sun picking lice. Well, we repeated this event. In France and Germany, every hay pile was full of lice, and without showers and not being able to wash bodies and clothes, you had lice. One time in Fallingbostel prison, we went through a delousing facility. But from there on, we didn't have a shower or our clothes washed for the next 3 months. So on Sunday, we sat outside and emulated monkeys picking lice. Since our beds were wood slats filled with straw and lice, it didn't take long before you had a new batch. The British bombed at night, the U.S. during the day. Our workstation in Misburg was on the prime target list, and we would get bombed usually during the day by the U.S. about once a week. When the air raid sirens would sound, we and the guards would walk or run to as much shelter as possible. There were some caves about 2 miles away in which we spent a good deal of the time waiting for the raids to be over. There was a bomb shelter that we could use once in a while with German civilians. One day in particular, we were in the bomb shelter about 2 miles away from Misburg when 12 1,000-pound bombs were dropped about 50 to 100 yards from us and really shook our teeth. With the inaccuracy of our Air Force, we began to think we'd be better if we stayed at the gasoline refractory rather than leave. It also amazed me how ineffective bombing was. One day, a 1,000-pound bomb hit directly on a rail track in Hanover. This resulted in a hole about 10 foot deep and 10 foot in diameter, and the rails were broken and twisted. In 2 hours, the trains were moving again. The effect of our bombing was mainly the volume, the constant pounding on the nerves, and the volume of work needed to make repairs. It was an extremely welcome sight to see about 25 to 50 of our aircraft overhead on the way to bomb the enemy and hopefully bring the war to a close. On approximately April 7th, 1945, our prison guards started us on a march to get away from Hanover. And we knew we were at the end of the war, and the end of our capture was drawing near. We walked the road from Hanover to Celle, then Echt. We were strafed by our own airplanes again on this march. One of the most disheartening facts was that our Air Force did some excellent pinpoint bombing of bridges, only the bombs didn't explode. The bomb was intact beneath the bridge. We could hear the noise of battle in the distance, and we knew we were getting closer to the end. We would sleep in barnyards and could eat better since we had some farm boys with us who could have a chicken's head off before the chicken could make any noise. We walked for about 8 days, and our group numbered about 100. The last night we saw the SS boys, which for my grandchildren were Hitler's nastiest trained troops. They would shoot their grandmother if ordered to do so. They bicycled in retreat from the front, which sounded very close. We told our guards that we weren't going any further. Since our guards were older men and tired of it all, they gave us their guns, took off their uniforms, and went with us. We got a white flag and walked towards the battle noise. We came to the top of the hill and saw some troops down in the valley. Nobody could recognize what nationality they were. Regardless, we decided to continue. We didn't appear like a very organized military group. We were a very motley-looking ragtag group. When we got down the hill about halfway, the troops at the bottom of the hill mounted their vehicles, preparing to shoot us. We proceeded, and finally the British recognized their own troops. Being prisoners for 5 years, they broke down in tears when they met their troops and being free. Have you ever thought how much of your life would be taken out by being a prisoner of war for 5 years? We felt it was also a great day, being back in Allied hands and back to freedom. In conclusion, I had a rough time for a short period of time, but how others stood up over much longer periods, I don't know. Some were on the front for several years, living in fear. Some were in rougher prison camps than I was. I always wondered if I was tough enough to have withstood more. The urge to want to live is a great motivator, and the body can and will take and absorb a great deal of punishment. I would hope that no one of you would ever again have to experience being on the front line and becoming a prisoner of war. I hope you found this video to be interesting and informative, and I thank you for watching.